Yeah, and with that, we actually have a call that segues into this. Normally, I go ahead and start and go through the theist callers, but we actually have an atheist on the line who wants to talk about abortion rights strategies on keeping abortion legal. Hi, Nicholas. You're on with Jen and Tracie.
Hi.
Hey.
Very nice to talk to you. It's a huge honor to speak with you. I've been following the show for many years.
Cool. All right.
So thanks a lot first. So, of course, probably for the same reasons you started the show by addressing this topic, I've been significantly triggered by the recent bans and bills that have been passed. Just to give a little background of where I'm coming from, I'm a physician from Argentina. I'm currently doing my psychiatry residency in Miami. So basically, I could not add any other argument than the ones you already expressed. I watched many of your arguments at other times about this topic. I honestly fully agree with all of them. So just at this time, I think it's very significant for not just the topic of women's rights, but also about the atheist perspective on religion and how religion influences policy. I think it's very connected how certain religious or doctrines influence this kind of political movements. And after so many years, I think around 40, of full access to abortion rights in the U.S., I am very surprised and shocked by what's been going on recently. Just the idea of my wife potentially being raped and then raped a second time by a government forcing her to continue that pregnancy terrifies me. Imagining that from a woman's perspective, I can only think it would be even worse. So far, what I've been trying to do, I recently started a few online projects, one in Spanish for Argentina, one in English with a co-resident that is called The Skeptic Side, in which the first episode we are discussing this very same issue and sort of argumenting. My co-resident is very good at finding holes in arguments, so I would go ahead with all the line of argumentation you've been referring to before, and he would try to find any sort of holes in that argument. He could not do that. I'm trying also to speak. So as a man, I like to think myself at least as an ally of feminism. And I try more recently to speak more with men than with women about feminism. I think it could be a more effective way to help with the cause.
Well, thank you.
Same thing. Yes, I think that's the best thing I could do. I'll finish right away. But basically, also, thanks to your show, I recently volunteered to Recovering from Religion.
Oh, great.
Yeah, very good.
When I finish residency, I'm a licensed therapist, I'll probably join the secular therapy group. I think that these are very connected fights, the fight against religious doctrines and the fight for women's rights. So my question is, those are the things I've been doing so far, trying to speak with other men and try to have good arguments about these issues. What else do you think would be helpful to sort of like, for instance, at this time in the U.S., sort of regain those conquered rights that are now at risk in the country?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And I think there are so many things. I understand you're not a U.S. citizen. Is that correct?
I'm not what, sorry?
I understand you're not a U.S. citizen. Is that correct?
No, I am not. I'm from Argentina. I'll probably stay after residency, but
okay.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, so
I cannot vote. At this time.
So voting is huge. But I mean, if you can't vote yourself, you can still support candidates who are pro-choice in other ways. So I would recommend, reaching out to candidates, finding out what their positions are, and supporting them in other ways. Certainly, your ability to provide compassionate care to your patients, and you're likely to see a lot of women who are traumatized by some of these laws. I think that'll go a long way toward helping mitigate some of the damage. And as far as reversing it, really, all of these laws that have been voted on by these legislatures, they're all going to be enjoined. The goal here is not necessarily to win on this round. They're trying to get these to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
And
yeah.
they want to overturn Roe.
Yeah, and I mean, anything that even gets shot down comes with an opinion, right? So it's almost like if you're writing a book and you're sending it to publishers and they write back to you and they give you feedback on it, and it helps you maybe hone your book and make it better. And that's what these laws are about. You send it to the Supreme Court, and the law gets shot down, and hooray, the law got shot down. But then they get information from these justices that basically helps them craft legislation that gets better, and then they can pass that next time. They look at where the judges criticized it, and we can maybe tweak that part of it, and so what they're trying to do is find out how much restriction can we get away with.
Yeah. And they've been chipping away at this for a long time. They found a really great tactic with the trap laws.
Oh, yeah.
The targeted regulation of abortion providers. I mean, abortion is an incredibly safe outpatient procedure. And they've made it sound like it's, oh my God, you're risking your life just by walking in the clinic. Yeah, and it's a really simple procedure.
As opposed to a 9-month gestation and a childbirth and 17 hours of labor, which is just a cakewalk.
Yeah.
Never hurt anybody.
I find that confusion very frequently with late-term abortion, which is not really an abortion, but either an induced labor or C-section.
Yeah.
That's huge in people's perception of how medicine works in that.
But I think information is a good thing, right? So I think most folks aren't supportive of these laws, and I think the good news is that when people see the laws that are this, I'm using the word comical not because I think it's funny, but it's just such an absurd degree. There's such absurd legislation. I do think that, like, even when the Alabama law came out, right, there were a lot of people that would love to see a total ban on abortion who said, oh, this is going too far, right?
Yeah.
And some folks posted that and said, look, even Pat Robertson says this is too restrictive. And it's like, no, Pat Robertson is saying this is too restrictive to pass.
Right.
He's not saying it's too restrictive for his goals, right? So he understands the optics of this, and that when you push something like that, it gets a lot of negative publicity. So people look at it and they say, whoa, wait, no, incest and rape, like children, 12-year-olds, and and so this makes people recoil, and this actually can have like a negative backlash for their effort, because it makes public sentiment kind of say, wow, this is really messed up, right? Because it is messed up.
Yes.
And I think that when you're out there, when you talk to people, and that's the thing. So we saw in Alabama, like, it was a woman governor that signed it into law after, like, 25 dudes, made it law. So you've got all sorts here. There's definitely conservative women, but I do think that a lot of this, and we have to affect all those minds. But I do think. It's not an issue maybe that a lot of men consider too deeply, because, and to be fair, it's because they don't have to consider it as deeply, right? I mean, all of us are more invested and more thoughtful and spend more time dealing with stuff that actually impacts us in our lives. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's just how people are. The things that impact you more directly are the things you put more interest and time into, because you have to, right? You've got to deal with the things that affect your life first. So I get this. And so when you're talking to other men, I think that's a good thing, because this might be an issue where they understandably aren't putting as much, thought or attention. And so when somebody just has like a single conversation that might make them understand one or two points with a little more clarity, I think that does a lot, because then it's just like, what, I talked to somebody about this, and when I saw that, this sounded good until they explained this or that to me, and suddenly I'm not as into that anymore. I don't think that's right based on the conversations that we had. And so I do think that those conversations, especially with other men, are a good thing, because it raises the issue with people that don't normally have to confront it head on. And so I think that that's probably a real positive thing, because public sentiment is going to play a big role in this. It's like ultimately the justices are going to make these decisions, but it's the legislators that write the laws that we put into office that are driving the laws that go to SCOTUS.
Yeah.
Correct. By the end of the day, both society and the political world are made up of individuals with individual ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I do feel I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I think you're doing
definitely.
great.
And I appreciate, I take a lot of things you mentioned that I hadn't thought about regarding how to have a better impact in the public opinion on certain issues. I do appreciate that. I don't know if it is to ask for too much. It's not strictly related to abortion rights, but it has to do with some struggle I have with some patients of mine that are believers. And I do get to a point, so I do both psychiatric medication management and therapy with some of my patients. Sometimes I do find certain patients that would, for instance, have such a strong religious beliefs that I can clearly see how much they are interfering with their well-being. For instance, I could have, without giving any specific information,
Sure.
I have a mom whose daughter is homosexual, and she, from the Catholic perspective, sees that as unnatural and morally unacceptable.
Yeah.
This daughter got married with another woman, and she is going through so much struggle. And from the medical profession, we have, so at baseline, there's so much reservation regarding how much to confront any sort of beliefs. Actually, having a religious belief in most psychiatry textbooks is considered a protective factor for suicide. So anytime I would want to suggest the possibility of maybe challenging, of course, compassionately and empathically, those beliefs, I do have some colleagues who would say, wait, hold on, you don't want to mess up with this protective factor. And I do experience that sort of conflicting situation in which I have trouble drawing the line from up to what point in that patient-physician relationship I am warranted to get into sort of doing something like what you guys do in the show, which is arguing in a... Yeah, please.
So one of the things, so I'm going to do something that I may get hate mail for this, but I'm going to actually recommend that you talk to an Episcopal priest. The Episcopal Church...
I could try that.
Yeah, the Episcopal Church has actually been very open to LGBTQ people for a long time now. And if you talk to an Episcopal priest, that individual, he or she, may be able to give you some ideas about how to challenge this patient's harmful views of homosexuality from a religious perspective versus openly challenging the actual religious beliefs. And I don't know if that would be, effective or what, but it might break them away from the more harmful aspects of the religious beliefs. If they had another, another way of thinking about those religious doctrines.
That makes a lot of sense, because that would also be a way to sort of protect myself from sort of being, I don't know how to call it, proselytizing, or sort of like people being able to say I'm removing helpful beliefs from people, even though I have so many objections to whether or not they truly are helpful. But there's this sort of consensus in the mental health professional community that religious beliefs are something more positive than negative.
Yeah,
Personally, I do not share that.
Yeah, I haven't found that to be true.
But still, I agree with you. at the same time, I am sort of regulated by that community.
Right.
So that's when the conflict comes up.
Yeah, and that's why I think, you know, if you get another perspective from you know, a faith community that doesn't share this absolute condemnation of homosexuality, and you know, Episcopalians, there's also the Lutherans, the Evangelical Lutheran Council of America. If you find you know, a Lutheran priest, you talk to them about that, and maybe you go to multiple religious communities like that and get their perspective on this.
Perfect. I really appreciate that. I haven't thought of it. So
All right.
thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank
Great.
you. Thanks for your call.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor. So keep up with the good work.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Great, thanks.
Woo. Before we go on, I did want to talk about